Muy buenas, mi nombre es Luis López Gonzalez, soy el director del Máster en Relajación, Meditación y Mindfulness del Instituto de Ciencias de la Investigación de la Universidad de Barcelona. Hoy, junto al doctor Bisquerra, que como todos conocéis es profesor de la Universidad de Barcelona, tenemos el placer de tener unos minutos para conversar con nuestro amigo y maestro, doctor Jon Kabat-Zinn. Welcome. Thank you very much for coming to share with us all your knowledge. Vamos a hacer unas preguntas, cada uno de forma sencilla, y esperamos que disfrutemos de dos. I would like to ask you, there are many meanings of mindfulness, but in one or two sentences, how could you define us what mindfulness exactly is, please?
I have three ways of doing it, okay? And you can take your pick. One is that mindfulness is relationality. It is the relationships that we have to inner experience and outer experience and how they're held. So another is to say that mindfulness is pure awareness. And another is to give my operational definition of mindfulness, which is a little bit more elaborate, and it goes like this. Mindfulness is the awareness that arises by paying attention on purpose, in the present moment, non-judgmentally. And then I have to say that non-judgmentally doesn't mean that you won't have any judgments, but that you'll attempt to suspend judgment and not judge all your judging. So when it comes right down to it, mindfulness is, you could say, wakefulness or open-hearted wakefulness, so that it's not merely a cognitive operation. It is the counterpart to thinking. It's another form of intelligence, namely awareness itself. And we don't get any schooling in that. We're not trained in awareness in school. We're only trained in thinking. And so thinking and emotional turbulence, we have plenty of that. But clarity and stillness and silence, and we don't cultivate it. Now, we already have it. It's not like we have to actually improve our awareness. What we need to improve is our access to our awareness, to this function that we're born with. So that's very valuable in a way in an educational setting, because usually what we feel in education or in medicine is that there's something missing and we have to fix it, make it better, complete it or whatever. But the awareness isn't missing. It's just, in some sense, ignored or covered over. And as soon as we start to pay attention, the awareness comes online for us, and it can be a powerful counterpart to thinking and emotional reactivity and the kind of internal narrative we're always telling ourselves that's not really true or entirely true, and it diminishes who we actually are.
Hola, buenas tardes. Yo soy Alexandre Belnet, profesor de MBCR para el programa Remind de la Universidad de Barcelona. Tenemos la suerte de hablar con Jon Kabat-Zinn hoy y hacerle unas preguntas. Yes, Jon, according to you, why MBSR program has been so successful? What makes it so effective for you?
I think that for a number of reasons which we could discuss, MBSR speaks to the final common pathway of what makes us human. So people feel touched to cultivate mindfulness because it helps us all to feel like we're more in contact with who we really are and not with the narrative we tell ourselves about how insufficient we are or how great we are. And this has a kind of profound authenticity to it that feels meaningful in a profoundly embodied way. So it makes for all sorts of possibilities and is fundamentally optimistic and healthy. That's why I think it touches people so deeply. Now, why it's exploded, interest in mindfulness and MBSR has exploded in the world, well, that's driven by a lot of complex elements, one of which is that we are really talking about ancient wisdom here that goes under the name of Dharma, a kind of deep understanding of the natural lawfulness of the universe. The Chinese might call it Tao. It's not merely Buddhist, although Dharma is used to describe the Buddhist teachings, but it has this more universal element that still includes the Buddhist teachings. So we're talking about deep wisdom that's kind of our genetic inheritance in a certain way. So I think we need deep wisdom at this particular moment in time on the planet, so perhaps that's one thing. The other thing is that for the past 37 years, I've been really attempting to study the effects of mindfulness in the hospital, MBSR in particular, on people with chronic medical conditions and stress and pain and so forth. And what we've done is actually develop the science of mindfulness. That's gone way beyond just the Center for Mindfulness, and now many, many neuroscientists are actually studying meditative practices, mostly mindfulness and compassion. And the results are so exciting at the level of neuroplasticity, genomics, and epigenetics, at the level of telomeres, and at the level of, within the neuroplasticity changes, the level of functional connectivity, how rapidly the brain changes, increases in gray matter density and so forth with meditation practice. It's like the science is driving the interest because it doesn't feel like it's just some philosophy or some ancient meditative practice that everybody's now enamored by, but for no reason. The science makes it very, very difficult to just dismiss it as superstition.
Yeah.
Mi nombre es Fernando Tobías, también soy profesor del Máster de Mindfulness y enseño en concreto cómo trasladar esos aprendizajes al mundo de la universidad. Una cuestión, why does the MSR program last 8 weeks or no more or less? Why 8?
I'm not sure you really want to know. It has to do with the vacation schedule in the United States.
Yeah, really?
For holidays like Thanksgiving and Christmas, and the start of the academic year in September. So 8 weeks worked better. It used to be 10 weeks. For the first 2 years it was 10 weeks, but without an all-day program. And so, but it was made it difficult to interview people individually, getting them into the program, run the 8 weeks, the 10 weeks, then get them out, and then run new people through the program. It just worked better at 8 weeks. The idea is that 8 weeks is still long enough, especially with the all-day program in the 6th week and on the weekend. 8 weeks is long enough for people to really get their teeth into the practice and be frustrated by it, be challenged by it, have some kind of effects, but not think it's some kind of magic. 6 weeks, I think, would be too short. 10 or 12 weeks, you might start to lose people, especially around holidays and the schedule. So it was an attempt to have it be long enough that it would impact you for life, but short enough so that you don't get, it doesn't present scheduling problems for the rest of your life.
Okay, perfect.
It's a trivial answer.
Me llamo Alberto Amutio, soy profesor de Psicología en la Universidad del País Vasco y también profesor del Máster Remind aquí en la Universidad de Barcelona. Buenas tardes. Good afternoon, Jon.
Thank you.
You have been talking about the explosion of mindfulness. And don't you think that the fact that so many courses are being offered in mindfulness, that in a way could run the risk of turning mindfulness in something superficial? Because in this country we are talking also about mindfulness.
Yeah, totally. I completely agree with that. But you know, that's a risk I'm willing to take, because otherwise we wouldn't have the potential to bring the Dharma in some kind of really profound way into the world. It would be kept in the domain of spirituality, of Buddhism, and so forth. But the whole world needs this, not just Buddhists. So I'm willing to run that risk. The word McMindfulness was actually coined by a Buddhist who doesn't like MBSR and thinks that it's, as I understand it, thinks that it's a kind of dumbed down, denatured version of Dharma. He's certainly welcome to that opinion. But from what I've seen here in Spain, I haven't seen any McMindfulness. I've seen a lot of really beautiful mindfulness. Maybe, I'm sure there's McMindfulness out there, and let's not call it McMindfulness. Let's just say it's people teaching mindfulness who have no practice of mindfulness, who aren't ready to teach this kind of thing, and who just talking about it as some kind of cognitive thing. That's not necessarily even bad, because you have to shift the whole culture. And then the culture discovers this is really deep, this is not superficial. And if there are enough people in Spain who care about the depths, then the superficial will not kill the deep. But if everybody goes superficial, then of course 500 years may go by before mindfulness really reemerges as a possible of value on the planet. This is not just happening in Spain, it's happening everywhere. There's another potential problem with this whole thing, which is that Buddhists have also coined the term stealth Buddhism. So they look at MBSR and they say, oh, they're secretly bringing Buddhism into medicine and into the hospitals, into schools and so forth. Well, that's the kiss of death if people say that. I'm not a Buddhist. I'm not bringing Buddhism into anything. I'm bringing a universal Dharma that the Buddha discovered, but that Dharma wasn't Buddhist. It was there before the Buddha discovered it, but he discovered it in the laboratory of his own silent wakefulness. Okay? And not easy. This is the hardest thing in the world to cultivate. So when we talk about mindfulness, we're not talking about some stupid little thing that everybody can sing Kumbaya and feel one. Not that that may not be a good thing to do, but we're talking about some of the most profound wisdom explorations known to humankind. And we need to bring them out of monasteries and out of ancient texts and into the modern world in ways that actually could reduce suffering, optimize well-being, and all based on a kind of ethical foundation that in the hospital, in medicine, is the Hippocratic Oath, first do no harm, and that in the rest of the world, there's a counterpart to it in the Buddhist tradition, which is the Bodhisattva vow, that you put everybody else first, their well-being, their enlightenment, whatever it is. So that's an act of profound selflessness and compassion. And that's kind of how we hold ourselves to that kind of standard. Or at least I hope we hold ourselves to that kind of standard. And when we do that, then there's a certain way in which the wisdom takes care of itself, and all we need to do is kind of make sure we practice. Does that make sense to you? But there is this concern that whenever anything gets more popular, then you'll see mindfulness on the side of buses, or you'll see big dirigibles in the sky, mindfulness, and of course maybe a lot of it is selling something. So there's inevitably, when something gets popular, we can sell mindful cigarettes or mindful Coca-Cola or mindful. You'll feel so mindful when you eat this cake, or this hamburger. But I think those kinds of fads, they come and go very quickly. Those of us, like yourselves, who are serious about this and bringing it into education in the University of Barcelona, you're not going to go away in 3 or 4 years and say, oh, that mindfulness was so yesterday, now we're into something else. You're here for, profound reasons. And so I have this deep conviction or trust that over time, it's our love that will actually transform both the world and ourselves, and be adequate to address not just the suffering in the world, but also the unbelievable levels of greed, hatred, and delusion that are driving so much of the suffering.
Soy Rafel Bisquerra, director del posgrado en Educación Emocional y Bienestar, que creo que está en los orígenes del máster en Remind, relajación, meditación y mindfulness, del cual soy también profesor. Dr. Jon Kabat-Zinn, in what cases do you advise against the practice of mindfulness?
I can't think of a single case in which I've advised against the practice of mindfulness. It's like, in some sense, advising against the practice of breathing, you know? I mean, we all need oxygen. And mindfulness is a certain kind of oxygen. It's the oxygen of wakefulness. Now, if someone is not ready to take a look at their own suffering or their own complicity with how they've structured their lives, if they want someone to come and fix them, wave a magic wand and may you be blessed in some way or other, they're not a good candidate for mindfulness. So I would, suggest, and we keep people out of the MBSR program if their general orientation is that they want someone to fix them, give them a pill, cut something out of their nervous system. They're not ready to do the certain kind of inner work. So they're not a good candidate for it. Doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with them. It simply means that they're not ready to investigate their own awareness and learn to befriend it and inhabit it. But that said, people get ready very quickly. So when Fernando was running the inner city clinic, sometimes people would come, and after a week or two, they wouldn't not be able to continue, right? Mm-hmm. Because their lives were just too overwhelmed to be able to do this, or they didn't really understand that why they had to do something, take responsibility for themselves. They wanted someone else to take responsibility for them. But then a year or two later, they think about it a little bit more, things change a little bit, they come back. Now I'm ready to do the work. Because I want to emphasize again, asking somebody to be mindful, it's only the hardest thing in the world, as I said, to cultivate present moment wakefulness and then to string several moments of it together and let that become, if you will, our default mode for even short periods of time during the day. You have to really be committed to waking up. And it's only usually when you have experienced so much suffering that you can't take it anymore. Yeah. And your psychologists and your surgeons and your doctors and so forth cannot help you anymore. Then all of a sudden you may think, maybe it's time for me to help myself. But then you have to investigate what would that mean, and that's when you're ready for mindfulness or for MBSR.
I really love, Doctor, that when you don't find the right words to speak, you make a silence. And I think you search at the bottom of your own. I love it.
Thank you.
According with this,
I'm not actually searching. I'm listening. I'm listening.
I know what you're doing. Okay.
And let it come to me.
I trust with you. So, my next question is: do you think that there are some people who have never meditated, and if we make a research, they can demonstrate a high level of mindfulness?
Yes, I do. I think there's some people who are just naturally more awake. On the other hand, there are all these mindfulness scales that are supposed to measure what's called dispositional mindfulness, and then scientists will correlate them with various kinds of things. I don't actually believe any of that, because I don't think that they are really measuring mindfulness. They may be measuring other psychological states. Who knows what they're measuring, but it's too problematic to ask someone to fill out a self-reported mindfulness scale, because if you ask that of somebody who's been practicing meditation for 40 years, that would be very different from asking that of the same question of somebody who's been practicing meditation for 40 minutes. Yeah. So it's a kind of inadequate tool for zeroing in on what the essence of mindfulness might be. But that said, there's no question that some people are just born more relational, more present, more open-hearted. You know it. I mean, we all know that. And so they, you could say, are more mindful. But that doesn't mean that when they get stressed, they know how to deal with it any better than anybody else. They may or they may not. So I think a certain amount of mindfulness training is actually valuable for pretty much everybody, in the same way as a certain amount of aerobic training would be valuable for just pretty much everybody. I mean, if we're talking about the single best thing a person could do for their health, including their brain, including the risk of dementia with aging, it's exercise. It's aerobic exercise to a moderate degree. So you could say that mindfulness is in that category. It's like so important that some amount of it, in terms of formal practice, would be really transformative. But the really transformative element is when you understand that doing something like this for 40 minutes or something like that, as we require in MBSR, this isn't the real meditation practice. It's only part of the real meditation. The real meditation practice is life and how we live it moment by moment by moment. So if you give people the impression, oh, you're a meditator because you do this, but you're not mindful in everyday life, you might as well not do this. You know?
Yes, John, mindfulness is, as I think you said so often, is before everything, is heartfulness. In relation with heartfulness, would you say that, according to you, that compassion, kindness and love are the same thing, or is it so different?
When they're words, they're different. When they're when they're embodied, they're pretty much the same thing. If the love is not caught in self-centeredness, that's the kind of love I'm talking about. Not like I want this, I'm in love with you as long as you're in love with me, or even romantic love, because there's a certain diluted element to it, and it does, I mean, wonderful as it is, and so this is about a kind of love that's really embodied, and it is, Mathieu Ricard would call it non-referential compassion. It's not personal. You're not personal, and your love is not personal. So then, like say the Pope, it would be everybody, or, I mean, he seems to just love everybody. His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, he doesn't differentiate between the high and the low, the important people and the not important people. There's no such thing as not important people, but in your mind. So we're talking about wisdom here. Kindness or compassion without wisdom is not really either compassionate or wise. So there's a certain way in which we need to continually nurture our capacity for seeing self in other, seeing other people's suffering as our own, and recognizing that when we honor that in other people, we are in some sense there for them, and they feel better even if we can't fix or change their situation. And that sense of deep connection is itself profoundly healing and leads to a certain kind of wisdom that doesn't come otherwise. So these are all, in some sense, the benefits of mindfulness practice. But I want to emphasize that when we practice mindfulness, we're not actually practicing it to gain any benefits. We're not trying to get some special mindful state. There's no such thing. Okay, we're not trying to get rid of our thoughts and make our mind still. We're learning how to inhabit the space of our own heartfulness, mindfulness, awareness. Let everything be exactly as it is, not take any of it personally, and then act in ways that optimize kindness and well-being and minimize selfishness, self-centeredness, and harm. It's not that big a deal. It's just the hardest thing in the world to make a consistent organizing principle of your life. You know? And then your life becomes the meditation practice. There's no separation. But your life is also, you're all teachers, right? Yeah. So what a teacher does, if I'm just thinking off the top of my head, I've never said that, but what a teacher does, I think, is you use your own body and your own life and your own voice and your own love for learning to ignite passion in others for the same investigation. It's not like you're going to download what you know into my mind or your students' minds. They're going to find their own understanding of the world. They're going to develop their own sources of information, bring that information into the domain of knowledge, so it's not just information, but there's some kind of knowledge, which leads to understanding, and even understanding. Who cares unless it leads to some kind of wise actions or wisdom? So this is a kind of arc or trajectory where we all use our being to, in some sense, inspire our students to love, to experiment or explore or to learn, and to practice. That some of this is not so easy. It's hard to remember things. It's hard to remember neuroscience, facts, or even organic chemistry. People have a hard time with it. But if you understand the beauty inside it, then any kind of learning, in my view, is a love affair. And so in a sense, what a professor or a teacher does is it's like your love is transmitted to your students to actually pay attention, because it's beautiful to pay attention. And you see things that you won't see unless you learn how to pay attention. And then not just get too caught up in thinking, because there are multiple intelligences at work: emotional intelligence, somatic intelligence, cognitive intelligence, intuitive intelligence, and social intelligence, and really, if you will, in some other way, sort of transcendent intelligence, that when all of these things, they're already native to us, they're our default mode. When we actually resonate with them, well, then we become, in some sense, educated or learned or functional human beings who can navigate the ups and downs of the world and love what is known, and also even more, love what is not known and investigate it.
Jon, on one hand, we say that the I, the ego, doesn't exist, it's illusory. But sometimes, on the other hand, we say that if you practice mindfulness, you have to be aware of yourself, doing something, cooking, talking, listening. Would it not be contradictory?
Not at all. The I, and even the ego, which is just the Latin for I, it's just a personal pronoun. Yeah. It's a language convention, okay? And so what I said before about not taking things personally that aren't personal, of course we take everything personally because we are the center of the universe, right? The problem is, so is everybody else. So that's where the selflessness comes in. If you are really wise, the Dalai Lama said, my religion is kindness. Okay? So that means that I'm not the center of the universe because everybody else is too. So we need to have that kind of regard for each other. That is understanding something about the nature of self, that it's a construct. It's what the Buddhists would call a fabrication. It's it's like a strange attractor in chaos theory. It's a pattern of energy that is kind of self-similar, but it's never exactly the same. So the you that wakes up tomorrow morning is not the same you as tonight, you know? Almost the same, and it's very important to know who you are in that way, because otherwise you'll go to the bank and you won't be able to take out your own money, and you say, well, I don't exist. So don't say the self doesn't exist. You said we know the self doesn't exist. It does exist, and it doesn't exist. It depends on. Both are true in a way. It's like a strange attractor. Is it the same? Is it not the same? You know, I know that, you know, from a conventional point of view, I'm Jon Kabat-Zinn, okay? But who is Jon Kabat-Zinn? I don't know. Who you think Jon Kabat-Zinn certainly is not who Jon Kabat-Zinn is. So everybody thinks they know. I get a lot of projections because all of a sudden I become like a political slogan for some people. Jon Kabat-Zinn, mindfulness. But for me, I'm just like a regular person. So it's not about the name. And the Heart Sutra in the Mahayana tradition says form is emptiness and emptiness is form. You know, so so we're actually looking beneath the surface of name and form and discovering what, you know, some people would call emptiness. They're empty of any kind of self-sustaining essential nature. But that doesn't mean they don't exist. It means that they exist in a complex mind field that's multidimensional, and that we don't really understand that much. But we have a brain up here which is so powerful, so complicated. It's the most complex organization of matter in the known universe. I'll probably say that later. And so the skills that we need to live in the 21st century are profound, and we need to teach children how to be in touch with their analog selves before they just get so fall into the trap of the digital that they forget that you're an analog being, and that it's possible to communicate with people without texting, for instance.
It's possible.
or to, you know, to just look on Facebook or Twitter for like confirmation that you exist. So this is a very profound question of like existence, non-existence. As soon as you attach to one side of that dualism, you're caught in a dualism. Mindfulness is really about the non-dual. The non-dual. And while this is very hard for the thinking mind to understand, it's not that hard for when we're just awake. Because the wakefulness doesn't make a separation between this and that. On an absolute level, on a relative level, of course, that's up, this is down. Except even that is, you know, the astronomers would never say that, because that's above the plane of the elliptic, that's below the plane of the elliptic in this particular, this particular coordinate system. So there's no up and there's no down. And there's no in and there's no out. But if you think we're outside right now, we're not. We're inside, you know.
Thank you, President.
Fantastic examples of being in the present, in the here and now. For example, people playing music or playing sports and even flow at work.
Yes.
I wonder how would you differentiate flow and mindfulness, or relate both concepts? Because when you're in flow, maybe you are out of yourself. I'm not sure about it.
Yeah, well, I think flow experiences have a lot in common with mindfulness in a sense, because, I mean, you could say everything is flow. And every level of the body, for instance, let's start with breathing. Breathing is flow. I mean, it's flow of breath. A lot of the time, we're completely unaware of breathing, so we're out of touch with that way of flowing. But if you actually learn to ride on the waves of your breath with your attention, then in a certain way you are flowing through one moment to the next moment to the next, and you're totally present. Now, if you're on a sports field and you are playing baseball, for instance, and that's probably not a good analogy for Spain, but I'll just use it. In baseball, you know, somebody hits the ball and you're in the outfield and you are going back, and the ball is up there and you're running like crazy. And you put your glove up there and you're not thinking, you're not calculating the physical trajectory of the parabola. You're just going, and it goes into the glove. And you say, how the hell did that happen? It's not thinking. It's a certain kind of intelligence that when we get out of our own way, plus we have had enough training to be able to do it. So a great baseball player, you couldn't go out there and just do the same thing.
That's right.
So it requires a certain kind of training to be at that level of skill. But it is a skill that is developable. And as you say, I mean, it can be play music. And we use the verb to transport. When we are truly transported, there's nobody playing the violin anymore. Is Mozart doing Mozart, or the violin doing the violin, but there's no you. Yeah. But that's a very, very high level of skill. That doesn't happen by just picking up a violin and sawing on it. So this is true in education, it's true in every field, that if we could help people to understand the benefits of this kind of learning, then you could practice it to the point where the flow starts to teach you, the flow starts to do you, so to speak, and then life becomes, in some sense, a lot less stressful and a lot easier. I mean, I'm thinking even romantic relationships. You know, if you're working with young people, there's a lot of that stuff going on, okay? And yet, why is there a 50 or 60% divorce rate, which there is in the United States? Why is all this love leading to so much suffering? And I mean, it's suffering. I mean, it's very difficult to break apart, and especially if you have children and all that. So where is the flow there? The flow is driven by hormones and chemistry and delusion. You know, where the feeling of love is not really clear. It's not really love, but you feel it as love, and it's driven by chemicals and hormones and so forth, and delusion. Now, that's part of just being young, so I'm not saying it's bad. I mean, it's fantastic. But if you are making decisions on the basis of that, you could create an awful lot of suffering. And I think people do, and I think it actually winds up being very hard on people's lives years later, because we weren't awake enough to see that there's a particular problem with going down a certain path. If you were clear about it, you could see, in grasping and clinging to another person, like, if only she loves me and I love her, then we're going to be happy for the rest of our lives. The clinging is a source of suffering. It's inevitable. This is like one of the fundamental teachings of the Dharma. If you self-identify and cling, you are guaranteed to suffer. It's a prescription, okay? Guaranteed, no exceptions. So if you knew that when you're 18, 20, 25, you say, okay, let's have, it'd be wonderful, we'd be together, we can explore everything, but don't cling to it. And then create problems for yourself by reifying a whole structure around it. And then 3 or 4 years later, discovering, I was completely out of my mind. It's better to know that you're out of your mind in the moment and enjoy it. I don't know if that example is useful, but it's what came to mind at that moment.
Very clear, very clear.
Last question.
Because you work with young people, and so, it's like you have to use examples that they're going to resonate with. Like, they don't want to hear anything from old people, what do they know?
Please tell us something about in which ways could mindfulness contribute to emotional education?
In my view, and I don't think Daniel Goleman would argue with this, he's a good friend of mine, but he might. In my view, emotional intelligence is the manifestation of mindfulness or heartfulness. So the first step is self-awareness. What is self-awareness? Mindfulness. And every other step has to do with awareness of how you manage difficult circumstances, difficult emotions, and so forth. So it's all based on a foundation in awareness, and I'm saying awareness is the same as mindfulness. So emotional intelligence, and again, you have to hear heartfulness at the same time. Emotional intelligence and mindfulness are virtually the same thing, except that mindfulness is more than just emotion. So any object that we could pay attention to, any mind state, could be better utilized, known, and valued if it was embraced in awareness. And therefore, when you're talking about emotional education, in the United States, in primary and secondary schools, over the past 30 years, all of the indicators of emotional competency, and there may be 30 or 40 of them, have decreased by 50, 60, 70% in young children. I mean, it's staggering. It's very hard to explain. So what used to get taken care of in the home, I mean, the home, the family was supposed to be a place where children learned social skills, where children learned to manage their emotions and so forth. That does not seem to be happening now in anywhere near the way it did when I was a boy. So the schools now need to take responsibility for training the kids in emotional intelligence, and even more than that, how to pay attention. This is the core exercise in cultivating mindfulness is paying attention. And as you know, in classrooms, children's minds are all over the place, lots of energy. So it's very hard for the teacher to get the students to pay attention. And when you get really exasperated as a teacher, what are you going to do? You're going to yell at the kids to pay attention. You're going to yell at them to pay attention. What about teaching them how to pay attention? Because they don't know how. It's like if you want kids to pay attention, let them learn how to tune the instrument of paying attention, how to tune the instrument of learning, and how to use the instrument of learning before you give them mathematics and geography and history. More and more teachers in the United States and the UK and different countries are doing that, and I think you're doing that here in Spain, and it makes complete sense that this is what education in the 21st century really needs to be, because things are changing so fast. We don't really know what the curriculum should be for young people now, because by the time they get into adulthood, the world will be so different. What they learned is not that useful. But if they learn how to relate to each other, how to work together with emotional intelligence, how to trust their own intuition, how to use their mind and also see how easy it is for the thinking mind to take you down the wrong direction. So you also need awareness to wake up. Those are skills that will always be useful for human beings, no matter what the technology or the society, needs in terms of, how rapidly changing, the world is.
Muchas gracias, doctor Jon Kabat-Zinn. Esas han sido las 10 respuestas a las 10 preguntas que le hemos formulado al doctor Kabat-Zinn. No queremos terminar esta entrevista sin agradecer al señor Fernando de Torrijos, que haya hecho todo lo posible porque Jon Kabat-Zinn esté con nosotros, y también a la Editorial Kairos. Nos vemos.
And maybe we should do one more thing, if you still got the camera rolling. Why don't we just take 30 seconds and just drop into stillness?
Very good. Very good.
Okay.
That's good.